Should you play Anno 1800? Yes. 1,000,000 times yes. This will be a no-brainer for fans of the franchise. But even if you haven't played any Anno before, you'll have no problem getting into this game. You don't even need any previous experience with the entire genre of city-building games. This title will make you fall in love with the concept. Heck, even if you're new to gaming as a hobby, you owe it to yourself to try this title. This doesn't mean Anno 1800 is perfect. No game is. Every title has its flaws, and this game has a few worth noting, but more on those later. On the whole, these drawbacks are outnumbered by the game's strengths, making this an experience no gamer should miss out on. To understand why we're so enthusiastic about Anno 1800, let's start with its presentation, the sights and sounds it has to offer. Anno 1800 strikes a beautiful balance between art and authenticity. Its colours and lighting are immediately breathtaking, be it on land or on the open ocean. The water in particular is striking in its detail, especially in the white waves seen near shores or in the wake of a ship as it carves through the seas. The transparency is also impressive on New World shores, enabling you to see the coral beneath the water's surface. Textures and the level of detail on the terrain and models look fine from an angle and the distance you'll be using most of the time. You won't be examining the detail at extremely close distances when you have an economy to manage, buildings to construct and ships to commandeer. Particle effects also look passable from a tactical top-down perspective. The fire and smoke from ships in combat look rather simplistic, certainly nothing to write home about. But again, you'll rarely be zoomed into ranges where you'll notice these inadequacies. For the most part, Anno 1800 is gorgeous, which is helpful considering sessions can last hours at the shortest. And the game is acutely aware of this, going so far as to remind you how long you've been continuously playing for, and even recommending you take a break. Most players will need this reminder, as the graceful graphics will make it all too easy on the eyes and can keep you hooked all day long and well into the night. But if the visuals don't draw you in, the soundtrack will. The music in this game is amazing, with separate, distinct tracks available for each location and situation. This is most noticeable when switching between the old world and the new, the latter playing a bright, almost playful tune. While the old world seems somber in comparison. This isn't always the case though, as the opposite can be true depending on circumstances. When you first start the match, you'll hear a pleasant, relaxing melody that is very reminiscent of the time period Anno 1800 is set in. Scroll over to the pirate's fort though, and the music changes to a dark tone that immediately signals danger. Pirates are far from the only hazard you'll have to contend with, though thankfully each danger is accompanied by its unique theme that perfectly reflects the ongoing turmoil, be it a riot, a fire, or an epidemic. Even though each track is different, all of them do a great job of grabbing your attention and keeping it where it needs to be until the crisis has been resolved. From music, we move on to sound design. The moment-to-moment gameplay sounds satisfying enough. The sounds played when a building is constructed provide gratifying feedback for your management, though you do get used to it after a while. It takes a naval battle for the sound design to really come into its own. As the thundering crack of cannons help drive home the degree of damage being dealt by both forces. While the sound design may not always be as exciting, it never gets in your way, and that should be appreciated. The voice acting in Anno 1800 is stellar. Just like the music, each class of citizen sounds different, with an accent that reflects their background, a distinction which is also integrally incorporated into the gameplay, but more on that later. Farmers, for example, speak with a delightfully rustic West Country accent.
That blooming turnip was the size of her head.
That fish pie smells gurtlush.
While workers lean a lot more towards Cockney.
Cure! A promise kept.
Artisans sound incredibly posh.
All I ever desired was a place to live and work.
It's remarkable how much character the voice acting gives these nameless NPCs. In fact, it could be argued these nameless NPCs fare better than the characters in the story, because as good as the voice acting is, the lip syncing is anything but. It's almost funny how awful the animations are, but it's also jarring to see the characters' lips say none of the lines you're actually hearing.
Where have you been? Without you brats, we'll never be done with this obligation.
This looks completely unnatural and will considerably impact the level of immersion you feel towards these characters. As for the story itself, you leave the new world to return to the old after hearing from your younger sister. Your father has died in mysterious circumstances after being arrested for a crime your sister insists he's innocent of. Your estranged uncle has seized the family assets while shackling you with the debts. If I was to continue on, it would spoil the plot, so we'll leave you to discover the rest. As you have few assets to pay this debt, you establish a colony on another island and start from scratch. This is how all sessions of Anno 1800 start, except your motivation won't be paying off debts, but expanding your empire. To this end, you'll want to claim as many islands as you can by moving a ship up the coast with the requisite supplies to construct a trading post. Once a trading post is built, the island is yours and can only be taken from you by destroying the post you've just built. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. How do you generate the wealth you need in either case? You don't. Your citizens do. So build a few houses for them to move into. If you want them to stay, you will also need to construct a marketplace near their homes and a road to the harbour or trading post. The trading post is the heart of any colony. If an enemy destroys it, they take over and you lose everything you've built on that island. Occasionally they may spare you this loss and claim all the revenue from your island, but I'll talk more on that later. Where were we? You have your citizens connected by road to a market and the port. Your citizens generate 5 coins for each house you've built them, and they can make more if you give them the requisite facilities. How? All citizens are farmers to begin with, and they're going to stay farmers until you give them the tools they need to advance. See, a market and a road might be all farmers need to survive, but they are far from the amenities they need to move up to the next stage. Workers. For that, they will need clothes to wear and fish to eat. Supplying fish is easy enough, just build a fishery. Constructing any building costs coin and timber. Ironically, and perhaps conveniently, the only buildings that don't require timber for construction are the buildings that produce timber. That being said, you cannot gather timber directly like you can fish. You must first build a lumberjack's hut to gather wood, and then a sawmill to convert that wood to timber. This is one of many production chains, and timber is but one of many resources that require multiple facilities to process. Back to the subject, where did we last leave our colony? You have a fishery to feed your farmers, a lumberjack's hut and sawmill to gather timber for construction. There is one more consumable your farmers need to advance: work clothes. Just like timber, these cannot be produced directly. Instead, you must first build a sheep farm to collect wool, then framework knitters to weave that wool into clothes. Clothes and fish are consumables, meaning supplies can get low if you don't have enough production facilities to provide for your population. One way this can happen is if you build too many houses without constructing additional knitters, sheep farms and fisheries to match the growing demand. Conversely, these facilities employ your citizens, which cost coin. If you build too many of these facilities without building enough homes to house the workers they need, you may face a budget deficit and a labour shortage. This is one of the many delicate balances you have to maintain to keep your colony running in ship shape. With that being said, even if you build these facilities in tandem with constructing houses, you will need to watch out for the outbreak of fire if you pack your buildings too closely. If left unchecked, fire will spread from one building to the next and can burn down your entire colony before you do anything about it. The key is to be proactive and build a fire station near densely populated areas. While these stations won't prevent fire, they will dispatch horse-drawn carriages to extinguish flames as soon as they occur. Your farmers are now well fed, clothed and supplied, in addition to being connected to a market and a fire station. Your farmers have everything they need to survive and everything they need to advance, but nothing to keep them happy. Why do you need them to be happy? Happy workers are productive workers. Happy citizens pay more taxes and are less likely to tear down your colony. More on that later. You could build a distillery to placate them with schnapps, but you will need a potato farm first to supply the distillery with their raw material. Another way you could keep them happy is to build a pub near their homes, perhaps next to the market. The latter is easier, as it doesn't involve a production chain. So now, your farmers are now fed, clothed and happy. They have everything they need to survive and advance. Just wait for them to populate their houses to capacity, and you will have the chance to press that upgrade button to welcome your first worker. Once you do press that upgrade button, you will bring about a new era, the age of industrialization. This automatic advancement in ages functions as a proof of your progress and is preferable to an RTS game like Age of Empires, where ages are a technology, an item you must spend considerable resources on manually researching before you can access units of higher quality. However, the way Anno 1800 categorizes ages can be unintuitive. For instance, your new world settlement will first reach the Age of Independence and then be declared a colony. Shouldn't it be the other way around? In any case, independence is an inapplicable term, as your new world settlements rely heavily on supplies that can only be produced in the old world, and consequently have to be imported from the old world. More on the two ecosystems later. Your colony now has workers, which comes as a mixed blessing. On one hand, workers enable the construction of entirely new types of facilities that produce new types of goods like bricks, sails, steel, and weapons. On the other hand, workers require the construction of entirely new types of facilities. Why, you might ask? Workers aren't content with eating just fish. They fancy bread and sausages, and they also need soap and school to advance to the next tier. To build the production facilities for all these commodities, you will need a new construction material: bricks. Bricks are required to pave streets and construct buildings like churches and police stations. Churches are an optional luxury introduced with the worker class, which doesn't make sense. Churches should be available from the get-go, as they predate the Industrial Revolution by centuries. Reminder, you usher in the industrial age when you upgrade to your first worker. This isn't an issue in the new world, as chapels are available as soon as your trading post is established. In either case, building these churches keeps your workers happy, which is vital in keeping your colony functional. Unhappy workers can start a riot, which, if left unchecked, will march through your settlement, gaining momentum as it incites inhabitants of every building it passes across. Police stations can be built to contain this threat. Just like fire stations, the police don't prevent riots, but try to pacify any that break out before they get out of control. It is therefore a good idea to build a police station near residential regions, though you will need both bricks and timber to begin construction. Just like timber, you cannot produce bricks directly and instead need to collect clay by building a pit over a natural deposit. Once your pit has started collecting clay, you can build a factory nearby to process that clay into bricks. But there is a catch. Your pit produces clay every 30 seconds. Your factory produces a brick once a minute, an interval during which your pit has produced 2 units of clay. Therefore, you will need 2 brick factories to keep up with the production of 1 clay pit. This is but the simplest of many mathematical calculations you'll need to make while balancing your production chains, as the cycle of many facilities does not synchronize well with the next processing stage. For instance, just look at the cycle for steel. To forge steel, you must first build a mine on an iron deposit and gather fuel from either a coal mine or a charcoal kiln. The charcoal kiln works exactly like the lumberjack's hut. It needs space for its trees and produces 2 units of charcoal every minute. The coal mine requires a higher tier of citizens to build, so you'll be using charcoal kilns most of the time. The iron mines will produce 1 unit of iron every 15 seconds, or 4 units every minute. Once you have the requisite fuel and iron, you can build a furnace which forges 2 units of steel every minute, or once every 30 seconds. For maximum efficiency, you will need 2 furnaces and charcoal kilns for each iron mine. The cycle doesn't end here, as steel can be further processed into beams or weapons. Steelworks produce a beam every 45 seconds, while weapon factories produce weapons once every 1.5 minutes. As to what these are, beams are construction materials you'll need to construct buildings like schools and, ironically, weapon factories, the other facility that processes your steel. Weapons can be used to construct mounted guns and cannon towers, powerful stationary emplacements that function as harbour defences and can damage or even destroy any ship that tries to shell your all-important trading post. Remember, if your trading post is destroyed, you lose your colony immediately. There is no land combat that could have allowed for an insurgent resistance. AI competitors use the threat of this destruction to force punitive peace treaties that can cost you dearly. Conversely, you can defeat your rivals by destroying their trading posts. You'll need ships to do so, and weapons are one resource you'll need to build a fleet. with another being sails. Sails are analogous to work clothes, as they can only be produced from wool collected from sheep farms. The third resource you will need is influence. So what is influence? Influence is a resource which is most often used to publish propaganda in the local newspaper. This is how it works. The editor writes headlines reflecting the truth, but gives you a chance to look it over before it's published. You can then expand your influence to censor reports of your shortcomings and even replace them with positive coverage to raise your populace's spirits. If you don't do this, the bad news published in the press can erode the happiness of your population. On the other hand, manipulating the media too frequently can backfire, causing resentment in your populace that eventually boils over in riots. Therefore, it is paramount to be judicious in your use of propaganda. But that's beside the point. It makes sense why you need influence to publish propaganda. Why influence is required to build ships is less clear. Does this make sense to you? Let us know in the comments section below. Even if you have influence, weapons and sails, you will need to construct a sailing shipyard to build your navy. Even then, the most powerful ships will be locked until your workers advance to the next tier of citizens, artisans. It is important to know that citizens become overqualified as they move up the social ladder. For a practical example, artisans don't work at steelworks or brick factories. Workers do. What workers don't do is work at sheep farms and fisheries. That is a preserve of farmers. If you go overboard and upgrade all your farmers to workers, your sawmills and knitters will complain there aren't enough farmhands and will suffer a dramatic drop in productivity.
There aren't enough of us.
Luxuries offer more latitude, as they are common across two tiers of your population. For instance, pubs will pacify farmers and workers, though artisans couldn't care less. Artisans and workers do share a common interest in churches, though farmers aren't appeased in the slightest. Artisans also introduce a new service, hospitals, and also the need for that service. Citizens can now fall sick, and if they aren't treated, the illness will spread and become an epidemic. Hospitals dispatch doctors and nurses who treat patients door to door to contain the threat, much like police contain riots and firemen extinguish fires. While this mechanic does seem authentic, it is odd that diseases don't occur before the arrival of artisans. Don't epidemics predate the Industrial Revolution by millennia? Admittedly, not having to worry about contagions does make the early game a lot easier, providing one incentive to take a more calculated approach. We've already explored the other, more compelling incentive, preventing your citizens from becoming overqualified. You can walk your way into a labour shortage of farmers or workers if you upgrade one too many residences, so exercise restraint when pressing that upgrade button. That being said, it might take a while before you can upgrade your artisans, as they can be very fussy with their demands, so much so that the goods they need to advance cannot be found on your island. It is at this point you will be prompted to charter an expedition to discover new lands. This involves you selecting a ship you don't immediately need, preparing the crew for their journey by stocking the ship with supplies such as timber and fish, then dispatching it on its voyage. After a while, the captain of your expedition will call for your help in dealing with a predicament. You will be offered a series of options, and the choices you make here will have a significant impact in the success or failure of your expedition. However, your crew will always lose morale even if you successfully resolve their problem. To prove this isn't an isolated incident, here are a couple of real examples. Crew lost morale after navigating a mountain without any sailors losing their way. Next, crew lost more morale after convincing locals to help them transport the ship over land. And finally, the crew lost more morale after successfully capturing a puma that had been stalking them. You can mitigate the morale loss by feeding them with extra rations, but why are they disheartened at all after overcoming a challenge? This makes no sense. Ultimately, this might not have mattered as the expedition did complete its mission, at least in this case. Success in this context sees the ship you dispatched emerge in an entirely new, different environment, the New World. The ship will then have to approach one of the world's islands to enable the construction of its first trading post. Settling the island will begin from the drawing board, as each island is a separate, self-contained ecosystem that doesn't have access to the goods and services from other islands you've already settled. However, you can help accelerate the progress of your new world colony by importing commodities from your cities in the old world. You'll need your settlement up and running as soon as possible, because New World pirates regularly attack your trading post to force you into extortionate peace treaties. The only long-term solution to this threat is to import your navy from the old world, as the new world lacks the iron you need to build ships from scratch. Players new to the franchise will be blown away by how seamlessly you can switch between the two worlds with 2 clicks of your left mouse button. You'll soon get used to it though, as it is vital to keep an eye on all of your islands at all times. Nevertheless, it's extremely satisfying watching your realm grow from a tiny community on a single island to a sprawling empire spanning 2 continents. Once your fleet does arrive in the new world, it can be a very satisfying feeling to watch the tables turn on the pirates. Bizarrely, the AI doesn't seem to notice a changing balance of power as the computer-controlled pirates continue to demand money for peace, even as your armada is bearing down on their port. One can't help but think, you should be paying me for peace. Pirates are one of several universal AI factions, with the others behind Madame Kahina, Sir Archibald Blake, and Eli Bleakworth. These are just NPCs you can trade with for resources. Occasionally, they also offer quests that you can complete for rewards, ranging from currency to items that confer benefits that improve your colony's productivity and effectiveness in various ways. Of all the factions, pirates are the only NPCs to be at war with you from the get-go. Additionally, pirates don't have much of an economy to manage. They occupy an island and dispatch military vessels to harass your ships and shell your harbour. You can get rid of them by destroying their harbour, but they will eventually attempt to return on a ship. If their ship successfully reaches their island, they will re-establish their fort. Therefore, it is recommended to station a ship on their shores to intercept this return. When you host your own lobby, you can invite friends or add AI rivals to compete with on an even footing. These characters have unique personalities that are reflected in the way they are written and voiced. The diversity in their disposition can go far beyond appearances and can even affect their interactions with you. For example, the princess was amicable from the beginning of the match, occasionally gifted me coin when my treasury was running dry in exchange for an alliance. On the other hand, Alonzo Graves, another AI competitor, threatened to go to war if he wasn't given thousands of coin and followed through on his threat. The drastic differences between these diverse personalities makes playing against AI feel surprisingly more dynamic than player versus player matches. This is one of the reasons we recommend you avoid wasting a lot of time trying to make PvP work. As good as the AI experience was, actual multiplayer was downright miserable. For a start, it was almost impossible to even get into a match. Multiplayer would get stuck on match found for hours on end. Even when I finally got matched with another player, my opponent would quit in a matter of minutes. This player quit after queuing for a quick match, the shortest of all types that pits 2 players against each other to see who can reach 5,000 inhabitants first. That being said, the game doesn't end when one reaches this threshold. You do get a victory screen, but you can opt to continue playing the game. The battle isn't over until one annihilates all the competition by destroying all their trading posts to literally wipe them off the map. This can drag out a 2-player match for hours, and we found only one opponent who stuck with it until getting annihilated. We doubt many would have the fortitude to commit to a medium or long match that can only be won by reaching 10,000 to 25,000 inhabitants and 250,000 to 500,000 gold. While, yes, you can resume matches from a save, it would be rare for all the players' schedules to coincide to continue the battle. If you still want to give multiplayer a shot, it might be advisable to stick with a quick match that pits you against one other player in a race to 5,000 population. And that is a sentence you cannot say in the in-game chat. Why? Because race is considered an inappropriate word. Why? I speculated it had something to do with racism, but curiously, racism and racist isn't censored. You know what is censored though? Damn. What the hell, Ubisoft? Have you learned nothing from the Rainbow Six Siege fiasco? Dodgy word filters are but one of many Ubisoft's controversial trademarks to make it into Anno 1800. The game is cloaked in both Denuvo and VM Protect, a combination that was reported to hammer weaker processors and cripple performance to unplayable levels. That doesn't appear to be the case here, as Anno 1800's performance has improved significantly from the closed beta, averaging 20 to 40 frames per second on the default settings configured between high to very high. This was on a 1080 Ti and a stock clock 2nd generation i7. While performance may be passable, this is far from the worst impact Denuvo can have on the player experience. If their servers are down, consumers can lose access to the products they've paid for. This isn't just conjecture. This has happened to people who bought Batman Arkham Knight, Mad Max, and Middle-earth Shadow of War. Last and also least, let's look at the Epic Store exclusivity. While many would bemoan Ubisoft ditching Steam for Epic, we don't think it matters much in this case, as Ubisoft had already made it a terrible experience to buy their games on Steam by imposing the need to log into Uplay in addition to Steam. You have to contend with 2 DRMs for the same price as one. Swapping Steam for Epic in this case makes little difference. Uplay is still the store you want to use if you want to buy the game. And that concludes our analysis of Anno 1800, a great game unfortunately hampered by unnecessary restrictions. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. There is more content like this on the way, so please like, subscribe and press the bell button so you don't miss out. We have a secondary channel that serves as a backup. Please subscribe to that too. And don't forget to press the bell button there too. While you're here, feel free to watch our analysis of game piracy, our playlist of de novo analysis, our hardware analysis of CPUs and GPUs,